down some. It's causing it to. But anyway, that's what we're going to read tonight and study. So let's look real quick at the video. I'll get these lights over here, Craig.
The idea was that the Israelites crossed down through here and crossed the Suez. And you don't think there was a crossing at the Suez or at Aqaba?
As far as I'm concerned, they're just too deep, too difficult.
If God exists, then miracles are entirely possible because there is a God there to act.
The wind can't do it. You have to rely then on a spectacular miracle.
It's explicit. The Bible says, and the Lord sent a strong east wind which blew all night.
If you had told me that somewhere near the Sinai, wind blows and splits the water, I could find it from there.
Had you ever seen a trade wheel before?
My eye caught something. It was circular in nature.
Two wheels stand like this, right, with an axle in between. Right. Circular shape. For certain, it's not a cold reach.
If you've got evidence, maybe it should be certified in some way. This was the only time that I had seen anything definitive, period.
How can we make a judgment on something we've never seen?
What you're saying, it's not wrong to look.
We need to look, but we also need to verify.
Do you think it was a larger miracle, or do you think it was a smaller miracle?
The text indicates it was very large.
A miracle is something that God does for us. He wants to get our attention.
And people actually who in our academic environment are sticking our necks out to talk about this.
The text is clear. Yahweh was at work in pushing back the water. This isn't about wind getting glory. This is about God getting glory.
You can call it the Sea of Reeds. You can call this the Red Sea. You can call it the Blue Sea. I don't care. This is Yam Suf.
I won't do that tonight. Just want to just play that just for a minute. There were a couple of things that was said in there, and of course, James brought up the evidence that's down in the water now that we talked about. So that's one thing, and you go back and you think we're looking at this one guy, and he said it's not for the wind and the natural things of this world to be able to get the glory for what happened here. It's for God to get the glory. And that's why the whole thing was done. And that comes out in the reading of this chapter 14, is that God does this for his glory. He does this so, number one, the Egyptians will know that he's God, and there's no question about it. And then number two, for the Israelites to know that he's God, and there's no question about it. This is, in my opinion, the one supernatural thing where millions of people saw it at one time. It's the definitive story. It's the definitive historical account in the Bible of God is who God is because of this chapter 14 in Exodus. Now everything else builds from this point on. If you go in, you read chapter 15, there's songs that they sing. There's a song that Moses sings, and he leads the Israelites to sing, and then Miriam, his sister, does the same thing, and so they sing in praise. They sing in honoring God because of what he did. And I'll go ahead and tell you, because this is in chapter 15 too. We get to it almost immediately after they leave, after they get over there and they have a worship service and they're singing praise and worship songs, they don't go far and they're out of water and they start complaining and grumbling and don't know how in the world they're going to make it. After all of them had just seen this and they know the God that they're following, they know the God that they worship, and they get to somewhere as simple. Now I say that simple, but I would tend to think that most everybody in here, if you were thirsty, you would get wrapped around the axles about not having some water to drink. Am I the only one that would probably get at least a little bit of anxiety about that? So it's hard for us not to be able to, to get on these Israelites with both feet, because we'd be the same way, because we are so, our thinking is so one-dimensional. It's so right now, whatever is in, we're just that microwave society is what we are. We don't have time, Kenny, to put it on the smoker and turn it on 215 and walk off and leave it. Well, I can walk off and leave mine. You can't yours, but you know what I'm saying. So I pick at him about my pellet smoker all the time. But we're that society that has to have right then. And so we're in the moment. So these Israelites, they were in the moment. They worshiped God, they were praising God, and it was all about the glory of God at the time that this was going on, and not just another exit or two down the road. They were already coming unglued about not having water. So we'll see that next Sunday or next Wednesday night. Mark's going to get the chance to be able to cover that, and but that's coming. And I would like to say that's the only time that happens, but guess what? In chapter 16, you know what happens in chapter 16? In chapter 15, God provides the water. In chapter 16, guess what happens? They do the same thing. And except this time we don't have anything to eat. I mean, what we're going to eat? What we're going to do eating out here? So it's just one thing after another, over and over and over again with these Israelites. But tonight, as far as we're looking at this, verse 1, now the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel that they turn and camp before Pi Hahiroth. And I said that 2 or 3 times in studying, and then even watched a video on it. There are questions about where the Israelites crossed over, and that name right there of this place to where they went. They basically went. They were funneled down into this area where it was a beach. Basically, it was a huge beach, but it was a beach. It was a flat spot, and to one side of them, and to kind of towards over here, there was a mountain range, and then over here was a mountain range, and the only place that it was really that they could have gone and gotten away from the Egyptian army was back, because the Red Sea's in front of them. So you got mountains over here that you can't cross, and mountains over here that you can't cross to get away. And Moses has funneled them, under God's command, has funneled them down, and they're camping down by the Red Sea. And guess who comes up while they're camping down by the Red Sea? The Egyptian army. So they're cornered. They're cornered in all 4 directions. They're cornered, and they can't get out. It says at the end there, it says between Migdal and the sea, opposite of Baal Zephon, and you shall camp before it by the sea. So that's where they are. For Pharaoh will say of the children of Israel, they are bewildered by the land, and the wilderness has closed them in, and then I will harden Pharaoh's heart so that he will pursue them, And I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all his army, that the Egyptians may know that I am the Lord. And they did so. Now it was told the king of Egypt that the people had fled, and the heart of Pharaoh and his servants was turned against the people, and they said, why have we done this? That we have let Israel go from serving us. So this always happened while they were going to try to let them go, and then they changed their mind, and now they're gone, and now they're questioning again. So he made ready his chariots. This is talking about Pharaoh. He made ready his chariots and took his people with him. Also, he took 600 choice chariots and all the chariots of Egypt with the captains over every one of them. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and he pursued the children. Now, the king of Egypt and Pharaoh is the same person here. But it says, and the children of Israel went out with boldness. So the Egyptians pursued them, all the horses and chariots of Pharaoh, his horsemen and his army, and overtook them camping by the sea beside that place that I can't say, before Baal Zephon. And when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them. So they were close enough to be able to see them. It's not like they just heard that they might be coming. It says they lifted their eyes and they could see them. And then they said to Moses, because I like this. I mean, they just, it's always something like this. Then they said to Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Is that a nice statement? Was that, there was a little bit of a jab to that, wasn't it? There was a little bit of a knife stab to that comment. That, I mean, was they not? I mean, if we're going to die, were there not places in Egypt to be able to bury us? Because that's what's going to happen to us out here. We're going to die and not going to be. I mean, we're just going to be out here. Why have you dealt with us to bring us up out of Egypt? Is this not the word that we told you in Egypt, saying, let us alone that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than it would be to die in the wilderness. So there was apparently some naysayers in the group, and while they were still in Egypt. Were you going to say something?
So they're saying it's better for us to serve the Egyptians, and really what you could put at the end of that than it is to serve Yahweh, because they're being called into service to Yahweh as a special people out of slavery in Egypt.
Yep.
And now the people in their unbelief are saying we just as soon serve the Egyptians.
Yeah.
So they're really, the word's not coming to me now. I'm just tired of it. That they're really rejecting God.
Yeah. Absolutely. Good point. Verse 12 says, is this not the, well, I read verse 12. Let's read it again because I stopped there. Is this not the word that we told you in Egypt, saying, let us alone that we may serve the Egyptians? For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than it would be to die in this wilderness. And Moses said to the people, do not be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again no more forever. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. And the Lord said to Moses, what's he say to Moses? Why you cry to me? He is, and I've tried to dig right, because I thought that's the oddest statement to be able to make, because it really wasn't. It wasn't Moses; it was everybody else. But Moses, if you follow what's going on here, Moses is the mouthpiece. He is the representative of these people. This is the definitive thing of Moses being the representative. So when God's looking at Moses, he knows Moses is not saying, God is saying, why are all these people, why are they yelling? Why are they upset? Because that's what's being said here. But he said, but tell the children of Israel to go forward. Think about that statement for just a minute. Tell the children of Israel to go forward. Where? Can you imagine that was the direction that you were given to be able to go? So we know you don't go to the left, don't go to the right, don't go backwards, go forward. What's forward? Water. A lot of it. There's a lot of water. So, but that's the direction that God, it did not make sense at all. And indeed, he says, verse 16 says, but lift up your rod and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it. And the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. And I like how that really is literally dry ground. That means dust. Okay? There's going to be dry ground that they're not going to have to worry about getting caught in mud. It's dry ground in the bed of this sea. This water is going to be lapped up. Verse 17, and I indeed will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they shall follow them. So I will gain honor over Pharaoh and over all his army, his chariots, and his horsemen. And then the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gained honor for myself over Pharaoh, his chariots, and horsemen. Think back again of Egypt now as a country. What have they lost? And they're about to lose their leader. They're about to lose their military. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This is complete destruction of the Egyptian area, country, whatever that you want. This is it. Verse 19 says, and the angel of God who went before the camp, and I like the way this is explained good, so listen clearly. The angel of God who went before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud went from before them and stood behind them. So this cloud, you remember the cloud that was going in front of them, and then the pillar, it was a fire at night, and this thing led them. So now the cloud goes from in front of them, goes to the back, but not only that, the angel of the Lord goes to the back, which is most people think is God's presence too. So this is can Pharaoh's army get to them? No, absolutely not. So it came. So it said so it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel, talking about this pillar of cloud. Thus it was a cloud and darkness to the one, and it gave light by night to the other, so that the one did not come near the other all that night. I wouldn't have slept. I don't guess I would have slept any that night. But as they were doing that, this water, as they were spending that night, this water is separating. Verse 21 says, then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea into dry land. And the waters were divided, so that the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea on the dry ground, and the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and to their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went after them into in the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and horsemen. So it's not like, and if you can picture this, it's not like the water has disappeared and they're walking. It's not like, like here's the beach, and you go out and the water kind of does this right here, and it looks like another beach out there. It's not like wading out. And it says that there was a wall of water to their left, a wall of water to their right. And I forget what video. It may have been a movie or something, and it never struck me about how that would look. But I can't remember what it was, but it was a movie about this. No, it wasn't well, it was kind of like, it may have been, but but there was one where you could see fish swimming. Which one was that? They were walking down through there, and what if you were on the end, James? What if you were on the end and you were like, here's the wall of the water is right here, and you're doing this? You'd have to. Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, the movie that I was watching is, whoever was on the side, they just kept going. They'd take a step and they would look, and they'd take a step and they would look, and they would see fish swimming in there, and in other things besides fish. But that happened. That happened. I don't remember what it was, and it aggravates me really. Hollywood will never make a movie of this to where it's real anymore. The closest that we'll ever have of it being of being able to visually see something like this is the Ten Commandments. But every video or movie that you see is always a cartoon, and that kind of aggravates me, because it makes us think along the lines of it's make-believe. It's just a children's story. And this is not make-believe. It's not just a children's story. Yeah, kids learn this. But this is adult as it can get. It really happened. This is not just some story in the Bible. So as they're walking, and there's a wall of water to the left and a wall of water to the right, and they're looking at this. The Egyptian army pursues them into this. In verse 24, now it came to pass in the morning watch that the Lord looked down upon the army of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire and cloud, and he troubled the army of the Egyptians. And he, talking about God, took off their chariot wheels, so that they drove them from the face of Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. They know. Now, and they probably knew before, but they really know now. I mean, they at least had an idea. I mean, all these plagues and everything, you can't explain that away. But when you're on a horse or on a chariot in the middle of the Red Sea and the walls are closing in on you, you know. You know. Verse 26, and then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians on their chariots. So they're through the other side. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and when the morning appeared, the sea returned to its full depth, while the Egyptians were fleeing into it. So the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. You see, they were still, this cloud was still between them. You understand? And this cloud was not this. It was not like the size of coming in here is not like a lightning bolt. We were watching this lightning show that was coming, but this thing was huge. It was big enough that the Egyptian army couldn't get around, and this cloud, basically fog, they had no idea where they were. They couldn't see to get out, and they couldn't see to get to the to the Israelites. They were lost in a cloud of fog on the bed of the sea. And then it dawned on them, like Mark said, that, at that point they knew. And then the waters returned and covered the chariots, the horsemen, and all the army of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. Not so much as one of them remained. But the children of Israel have walked on dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall to them on their right hand and to their left. The Lord saved Israel that day. Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Thus Israel saw the great work which the Lord had done in Egypt. So the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. Now that's a big. That's something you don't see. That's something that's an experience that these Israelites went through, and it should have lodged into their head who God was. But their short-term memory was just horrible. Well, maybe short-term. They had really good short-term memory. It was long-term memory that they really struggled with. But they lost it over and over and over again. And we're going to find out that God says, and well, Mark will cover this. I don't want to get too much into it. But God says, you need to follow me. You need to worship me, and I will take care of it. And as we go into these other books, maybe we start reading a lot of the law that's laid out for Israel, and really it comes down to God will bless them if they will follow his commandments. But if they stop following God and stop following his commandments, he will allow the world to be able to do with them what they will. And you see you can look at this world right now, and you can see with people walking away from God and people not following God's commandments. If people were serious about God, think about it. Every time we open these doors, these pews would be full if people were really serious. They would want to know everything they could about God. They would want to be around other believers. They would want to be involved in something where they were going out and they were sharing the gospel, because God is God. And he is special because he is God. But it's amazing that something like this that people can go through and still question God. So anyway, that's the biggie. And I think about how many times grandkids heard the story about what happened, and children heard the story about this, all the way up to, what's the day? October 11th, 2022. And we're still talking about this one account in history where God the children of Israel walked across the Red Sea on the bed of the sea. All right, let's stand and we'll be dismissed. Thank you for being here. And just remember to pray for those on our prayer list. Pray for those that were added tonight. We'll get those. One thing that